All right, good afternoon. It's Southern Railway Memphis Division 1975-ish. Again, it's just that time of year, getting a lot of work done in the layout room. My wife was out of town for a couple of days, so actually I got even more layout time, and so I got some interesting things done. I was going to show you real quick. So right now I'm running this ancient, DCS 100. It's going to have to be replaced before, when the layout gets, a lot closer to finish. But right now it's running everything. And I literally was almost running a single wire setup. But I want to eventually be signaled. So I divided it up into blocks. So laid out the blocks on the layout based on the longest train length and, where signals were back in the day. And then came up with blocks. So what you're seeing right here is all the wiring. Every block has got its own run of wire to it. And some people are like, well, why'd you do it that way? The plan is to use a Railroad Circuits LCC componentry, and they've got a signalman that's an 8, and they got another one that's a 4 combined, so I can get 12 in detection blocks. And so the mains are divided up, and then where it's double track, each track on the double track section is its own detection, because it's signaled independently. And so the idea is eventually there will be LCCs here, or LCC componentry down here, with independent coils for every one of these wires that goes back. So you can see, and each one of them is color coded with zip ties. And what you'll see is that it's red and green and combinations of red and green for the mains. So anything with a red on it is the main closest to the front of the layout. Green will be the main on the furthest. And so you'll see here, here's a red and a blue. So that's the that's the number 1 main. And then you'll have some others that are simply colored. But under the layout in every bay, you can see that every color, every wire is tagged. So I know in any given point, I know which wire is which. I'm using these connectors, which I got off of eBay. They're pop open, pop closed for hooking up feeders for every section. So over here, the simple red, red here and green here will feed the 2 mains. And then as we get, the bay end right here, and this is where the block ends. And then the next the next chunk will start here with clear and red, and I believe green and yellow. This one. So they'll start right here with, feeders going this way and coming up this edge of the layout here. You notice there's the sets of going over to, the far side of the layout over there. And then the set that runs the single main over here is this black and red here, which comes across, turns in right here, and will merge into that set of connectors right there. And so I know that tower signal controller, theoretically you can run long runs of wire out to the coils out on the layout. But but it's like, all right, you're running a wire out someplace. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna run it this way, and in my head this will work. I don't know anybody else that uses it. Railroad Circuits, though, been around a while. They sell a lot of stuff apparently, and fortunately, in my case, the place where it's manufactured and run out of is Waxhaw, North Carolina, which is just down the road from me. So worst case scenario, I can literally drive down to the guy that makes the stuff and talk to him, you know, in person. I'm at in my head anyway. I'm hoping he's at least, you know, mildly accessible. So that's, so I've been setting up the wiring, got it all, the single wire all ripped out, all new wiring, and then we're back to running now with I haven't cut gaps yet. There's the end of another block here, the end of another block is here, and you'll notice this, that's the empty coal train sitting here, and it's sitting like across the block line, but actually when the coal train is sitting up, if it sits up here, this block doesn't end until here. So most of the time if he's sitting here, it'll be up here. Yeah, the tail, but again, that's at the time I'm modeling this is the longest train that'll ever run here. So the tail end of him may stretch across the block limit, especially when he's parked on the third track here. But that track, I won't say is dark territory, but it won't be, since it's current sensing. So if it's just parked there, it shouldn't kick the signal. It'll just signal as occupied, but it does, the coal train does fit on it without fouling the number 2 main. So again, this is all, again, iterative design. Actually had the move where the end of the block is because when it was here, which again would make sure that, definitely the coal train's, tail end is inside one block when it's just sitting. 90 times out of 100, the coal train does not sit right here. It sits on the inside track here. Anything sitting here will be shorter than the coal train and definitely well inside the block limit. So signals will go, there'll be signals effectively, right here where, this number 10 sitting here is basically indicative of the split, which coming from this end, this side of the layout would be Norala Junction, which the split here would be this track, goes down the helix to Sheffield Yard, and this track coming this way would basically go to Birmingham. Well, in this case, it's just the, continuous running junction that will end up, being used when I just want to run trains up on the upper deck. But it is actually realistic to have a Y right here at Norala Junction for that purpose. So this is the line technically to Birmingham. Well, on the other side, so the end of the, this block will run from right here at, the crossing just west of Tuscumbia. So it'll run, this block will be junctioned right here and effectively run around to the switch at the Y. So again, plenty of length for anything I'm dealing with here for signaling. So there'll be signals here. There'll be a set of signals here. This is the block junction here. There'll be a set of signals on a gantry bridge, over the bridge over the tracks here, over all 3 tracks. Well, at this point here, there'll be the next set of signals will be here. And that's railroad. That's actually, prototype there. After that, there'll be a signal at the block junction here, right after the merge to single, and again, back up there at. Right, so got all this wiring done. Layout's back up and running. Start run. Got all my. I think I've got all my sound locomotives sitting on the layout at this moment running, except for 2 GP30s. And I'm enjoying, running lash ups with multiple, 3. Each of these has 3 sound locomotives in it, and listening to them Actually, this one's, all 4 of those locomotives are have a sound in them, so you definitely get some neat audio, you know, running them like that. So that's been a lot of fun. That's what we've been doing. Again, just kind of continue to play around a little bit with, you know, some scenery. I'm still working on, you know, securing track in some different places that I've, you know, I feel like, yep, that's going to be the final iteration of what's going to be there. You know, there are places on the layout that are, you know, pretty well definitive. But again, over here, I'm still talking about, you know, raising this up a little bit. And, you know, this, you know, the crossing is by no means set into stone. I think from here this way is how this is going to be. It's how I want it. And it runs okay. So it's, at that point, it's going to be pull everything off, sand the cork down, and I really got to get this transition here between, you know, flat and onto the little bit of a grade here done a little bit better. I got to work on this transition between this bridge track is code 70 and the code 55 here, same on this end. And again, it's solid to, you know, here, and then but then from there on, because theoretically this piece of foam here could still come out and be replaced with something else at this, you know, just again, because that's just continuing to kind of evolve a little bit. Got all the track glue down over here. Been, you know, putting new feeders in. You can see, you know, the feeders are, you know, up. But I've been working on getting, you know, feeders run on every piece of track that's not, you know, because the curves are soldered together. And then I've got to drop feeders for these tracks back here. Get those wired up. You know, that train ran to that point, but man, it barely got there because it is running solely on the electricity getting to it through turnouts, which, you know, is never the best of ideas. So I really got to get going on feeders especially for this line, and then onto these tracks here for, you know, storage track and whatnot. So that's the current project, is getting all this electrical stuff done. Still got it back to the point where I can run trains again, which is, you know, always fun. Because at some point, you know, you get a little worn out with working, and you've just got to lay on, you know, just power something up and run it. As one of my online groups say, just freaking run trains, JFRT. And that's definitely a thing that, you know, if you have that capability of getting it to the point where you can do something, even with, you know, hack together track and temporary turnarounds and stuff like that, it is totally worth being able to run a train. It makes for a huge difference in attitude and just, you know, your ability to just go, I don't feel like working right now, I'm just going to do this, and you can. Anyway, well, appreciate you guys watching, and if you've got any comments on what I'm doing, please, by all means, leave them. I do enjoy doing this. The funny thing is, hey, Mom, my mother is one of my biggest fans for these videos. She loves to, you know, just check in, see what's going on with the railroad, and listen to me talk. But I do appreciate it, and like I said, if you have any comments or any ideas, or frankly think that this is a fool's errand and you're like, hey, you should really rethink what you're doing, by all means, let me know. I am open to suggestions. That's kind of why I'm building the layout the way I am, because as things change and it's like, oh, well, this works or this doesn't, you can always change it and redo it. Appreciate you guys again. Talk to you later. Goodbye.